This field of view is crazy, and this is from the Brighton Star 9mm f5.6. I want to do something different with this video, and rather than just blab on about different specs of the lens and its build quality, and yes, I'm still gonna do that to a degree, but I want to show you what you can do with an ultra-wide lens as ultra-wide as this. I could put my arms all the way out. I could put my arms all the way. That's crazy. What? I'm so used to having to contain myself, but what? That's crazy. I want to show you what fun you can have with this lens.
This lens is really cool. I've always liked wide angle lenses because you can get a perspective that you just can't with the human eye. And especially if you put it down low or like close to an object, you get this really interesting, warped, huge, distorted perspective that you just can't really get with any other lens. Of course, there are limits to this before things get a bit too imperfect. We can see this with fisheye lenses where everything's just really bowed and not anywhere near what it would look like in real life. But it's from that filmmakers have sought out a super wide lens that is still rectilinear. Now, what does rectilinear mean? It basically means that the lines that are supposed to be straight are straight. All this demand brought out lenses like Samyang's 14mm, Laowa's brand new 10mm f2.8, and now Brighton Star's f5.6. Why I chose to record this in the center of town, I don't know. It's so noisy.
Brighton Star did send me this lens for this video to make a review about, but they don't get to see the video before you guys, and they have no influence over what I say. Honesty is one of the #1 things I want for this YouTube channel, so I will always let you guys know if anything's sponsored, anything's gifted, blah, blah, blah. But every thought is my own.
Now, I don't own any of the other lenses that I just mentioned apart from the Brighton Star. I used to own the Samyang, but I'm gonna talk a bit more about the Laowa 10mm in this video in comparison with this 9mm, considering they're a lot closer in focal range.
Brighton Star say this lens is almost 100% rectilinear, and I appreciate them being honest and not just saying, yeah, it's totally rectilinear, because there's like, if you get to the very edges, I mean, where's the edge? You can see there's a little bit of warping on my hand there, but for the majority of the shot, everything's rectilinear, which is sweet. Now, I would like to talk about real places that I would use this lens for. You would probably think that an ultra-wide angle lens like this would be perfect for vlogging, and that was what I was thinking too. And although it is a pretty cool lens for vlogging, I mean, these shots of me going around town on my board, I actually think they're pretty cool, but it's kind of a funny thing to say. I think this lens is too wide for vlogging. For a vlogging lens, typically we lean to the wider angle of the majority of lenses because not only does it show off ourselves, but it shows the environment that we're in. But the point of vlogging is to show what you're experiencing. And I feel like with this 9mm, I mean, look how small my face is in this frame alone. And I'm assuming here, but you probably feel further away from me because I look further away from you, even though I'm actually way closer to my camera than I usually am for these talking head setups. For vlogging, you don't want to be so far from your viewers that they can't experience your emotions through your face as well as experience the moment. They need to experience it with you. That's kind of the point of it. All that being said, I do think there's definitely a place for a super wide angle lens like this in vlogging. I think for things like where I was going around town on my electric longboard, that kind of shot was enhanced because of how wide this lens is. You had more movement of things going by, and it kind of just, it made things look a bit cooler, a bit more cinematic, if you will. But I thought it looked cool, but it still wouldn't be how I'd want a normal vlog shot to look. I still want there to be some connection of emotion.
Another area this lens excels at is architecture photography. If you've been following me for a little bit, you may know that I'm more into filmmaking than I am into photography, but I did start out in photography. So it was nice to go around different parts of Manchester and focus on the architecture a bit more with this super wide angle lens. The town library, which I'm actually just sitting right next to, is a very cool spot to show off because it's got these huge pillars that with such a wide lens, and thankfully again it's rectilinear, you can show them off in a really unique way compared to if I were to shoot it further away with like a 24 or even my 18mm that I'm filming on right now. Now, whilst there are a lot of good things about this lens, there are a lot of bad is too strong of a word, but like, let's call them trade-offs. The first trade-off is this lens is manual focus only. Now, I'm no stranger to shooting with manual focus lenses. I've shot with cinema lenses before and other manual focus photography lenses. It's not a big deal, but I feel like a wide angle lens, you're gonna most likely want to use it for vlogging. And for something where I'm moving my head backwards and forwards a lot, I don't want to have to be thinking about if my eyes are in focus. I want that to be taken care of because I'm focused on experiencing the moment and showing it to you guys. On that note though, have you guys wondered how wide this lens is compared to like a normal vlogging lens? This is the 18mm Lumix f1.8, a very familiar vlogging lens. We can see around me, but the focus is still more or less on me. It's wide. I would call it a wide lens. I'm holding it like arm's length right now. And now we are on the 9mm. This is so much, this is 2 times wider than the 18mm. This is pretty nuts. And obviously we don't have autofocus. That's not the autofocus. That's not the focus ring. There we go. Obviously we don't have autofocus with this lens. So you're kind of limited. Like if I do this and that, I don't really know if I'm fully in focus right now, and that's something you have to set ahead of time, which is a problem, but I think for the price of this lens and the fact that it is pretty rectilinear, it still does look pretty cool, and it is kind of usable for vlogging to an extent. Now the next drawback is because of the shape of the front element, you cannot put an ND filter on the front of this lens. Now Bright & Star have come up with a very clever workaround, but it's flawed. You can put an ND filter onto the back of this lens, and that is chef's kiss. However, where it's flawed is they only offer 2 ND filters. The second one I had to ask for specifically because I couldn't find it on their website, but they include an ND 1000 filter with this lens, and that's great for photography and all, but for video, reducing the light by 10 stops is a bit too much. I only have luck with this ND filter when it's a bright sunny day and when I'm shooting at midday where the sun's at its highest and strongest. And honestly, I don't always want to have to shoot at that time of day or that kind of environment to be able to get good video exposure with this lens. I feel like it's just an area that was overlooked, and really this seems to be more of a photography lens. Now, a difference between the 18mm and the 9mm, besides obviously the focal length, is that this is f1.8. So there's a much shallower depth of field. Things behind me are nice and blurry. Whereas with the other lens, as you can see, everything else is very much in focus too, because the lowest f-stop is a 5.6.
Now the next drawback with this lens is the lowest aperture is f5.6. Now this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it would have been much nicer to have a lower f-stop, like at least an f2.8.
I feel like this is where the Laowa's 10mm f2.8 comes in, because it lets in so much more light. You're able to shoot in lower light conditions, and you can even screw on a front-mounted ND filter, so you can control your daytime exposure and have a fast enough aperture for nighttime videography as well.
The drawbacks with it being f5.6 are, for example, with this talking head setup, it's daytime outside, I've got all my lights maxed out, and I'm using the second native ISO of 4000 on my Lumix S9. So I'm really cranking things up here, whereas normally I have my light on like 20% or something, and I have the ISO set to 640.
This is not a low light lens, which is pretty evident because I had to whip this thing out. The lowest aperture being f5.6 means this lens really isn't suited for any sort of low light videography. Bright & Star do point out that you can do astrophotography with this, and yeah, when it comes to photography, I guess it doesn't really matter too much because you can always put the thing on a tripod and drop the shutter speed really, really low to get enough light in, and of course then you get those nice motion trails if you want them or not. But of course, if you want to shoot video, you're out of luck if you want to do low light. I'm using my Lumix 18mm f1.8 right now, and this, whilst it's a little bit dark, I will admit, you guys can see me, and you know, I'm using the second native ISO of 4000, and I don't have any light apart from blue hour, I think. That's it.
Okay, the next huge issue you guys may have actually already noticed in this video, there's a lot of IBIS wobble. Because this lens is so wide, even the best in class, industry-leading IBIS from Lumix creates these hideous IBIS wobbles in vlogging shots. I've noticed it more in shots where there's more movement, and it just looks like jello, like literally like you're shaking a jelly. If you want it to completely be gone, you have to 100% turn off all IBIS, electronic and sensor. There have been some shots where I've had IBIS on that I haven't really seen too much IBIS wobble, maybe just a little bit. I think it depends on how smooth you are with your camera movement, but if you're doing some regular vlogging where you're walking around a fair bit, you're definitely gonna have IBIS wobble. Overall, I do like this lens, but I feel like it's somewhat a specialty lens. For only £449, it's not a badly priced lens at all. It's nice and small, everything's made of metal. I like that there's an ND filter included, that's pretty thoughtful, even though it's ND1000, which is crazy strong. But it's well made and everything else, so that's pretty good for the price. The other lens I mentioned in this video, the Laowa 10mm, that is $799, so it's almost double the price of this lens. I don't shoot architecture, and because of the issues with exposing for video due to the ND system they've set up, I can't see myself using this for a lot of video work. It would have to be a very sunny day, and even then it'd probably have to be midday where the sun's at its highest and strongest. I live in Manchester for one, where it's constantly grey and raining, and two, I don't always want to shoot when lighting's at its harshest. I sometimes want to shoot at sunset, where this lens just may not really be usable. You know, without cranking the shutter speed instead, which I don't want to do. I think if Brighton Star introduced more ND filters, it could make this lens way more usable. Something like an ND4, 8, 16, 32, weaker strengths of ND would make this way more usable for video. I think an ultra-wide lens should be in everybody's bag. It lets you get really creative with angles and show a perspective that you just can't get with the human eye, as well as show off experiences that you're going through with your audience. I'll be keeping this lens because there will definitely be some times where I want to bring this lens outside to play. It just may not be in my camera bag every day.